Thank you for coming back, everybody. We are in our Dev Diary series inside of InstaMAT. The big thing that we're going to cover inside of this individual episode is how we can create a single 2D projection of this overall graphic design for the box and use that as a decal over everything else. So in this layering project, if you remember in our previous videos, we would technically need to duplicate every single one of these mesh projections all along the way. And we'd end up with something like 28 iterations of individual logos scattered all along this box. And that just becomes somewhat unmanageable. Let's just start with making that overall decal. Let's go into our package and let's get that Nabro logo. And this is a simple 2D logo. And we want to project this onto the box, right? Let's see if we type in project. We get our mesh projected mask, which we're already familiar with. We have the material mesh project, but we're not actually projecting materials. We're actually just projecting a 2D logo. So this isn't what we want to actually touch. And then there's also the texturing mesh project, which if we read over here on the right, it says provides a high quality triplanar projection of the input image on the specified mesh. So we could use this to project the overall artwork on the box the way we wanted to. But at this current stage, we still need to actually set up the decal. So none of the actual projection methods inside of InstaMAT here are going to work for us. We need to create a map. And if we type in map, we get a lot of different options here, which is really, really nice. There's image mapper that actually looks like it could potentially work. It says maps an image or multiple images using the UV coordinates map. Optionally, a position map can be used to distribute randomly. Okay, all right. So this is along the lines of what I think we might be able to use. So let's just start with this. Let's start with image mapper. All right. And we can see that the Nabro logo is being repeated over and over and over and over inside of this image mapper. So why is that happening? We have our UV here, and if we hover over on the right side default input, you can see that we have what looks like a UV map. And if we actually could project this onto a single plane, then we would get this overall image, just the image. So let's try that. Let's look at our library. I'm going to drag that out. And I'm going to pull off this because from this single plane, we need the UVs. So I'm going to type in the mesh UV. And it generates a UV map with the vertex texture coordinates of the input mesh. Exactly what we're looking for. So if we look at this image mapper again and look at that default, you can see that is exactly why this is getting tiled across this entire 2D area like so. So if we plug this in, then we get just the single logo. Cool. Awesome. We're making some progress. So let's look at the other features available inside of Image Mapper. If we expand the transform here, we have a wrap mode, we have rotation, rotation snap. We can modify the scale. So let's just start with the scale. And I'm just going to crank this up, and you can see what's actually going on is it's taking the UVs and it's tiling them through this asset. So as you increase the scale, it's going to increase the tiling. But we don't want the wrap mode to be repeat. We would like it to be clamped, so we get just a single logo. So let's look at the offset. And the offset section, it has a little tiny UI widget with a little tiny crosshair in the center. And we can drag this around, and you can see on the image mapper, I'm moving this in UV space. But if I right click on this, you actually get a grid. So you can do some more fine-tuned adjustments, which is really nice. Exactly what we want. And if you hold down Control, you can snap to individual grid points. And I'm going to position this Nabro logo right about in here, and I'm going to scale it down a little bit more. So remember, this controls the repeating of the UVs across this 2D plane. And so you need to scale that up in order to scale the image down. And now that we have that Nabro logo kind of in place, let's go ahead and drag in our DCC logo, right? We had that in the top band of everything. So let's drag in the DCC logo. Let's take our image mapper. Let's duplicate that. Let's take the UVs from our mesh plane, plug that right into the UV portion of this node, and take the DCC logo and plug that in. And we know that the DCC logo needs to be on the right-hand side, so I'm going to take the offset and the transforms, right-click here, and drag that over. Now I just need to blend these two together. So let's, if you ever want to modify some of your keyboard shortcuts, if you scroll down to the bottom, you can see in the favorite section there is blend. So I assigned that the keyboard shortcut of B, so that I would not have to right-click, type in blend to access the blend node. Instead, I just hit B on my keyboard and I instantly get a blend node. You can do this for all the nodes that you find that you commonly use, and it's really, really handy. So just want to put that out there for everybody. This is looking pretty decent. Let's first let's look at the mesh, and then let's view this as the output material. And I'm seeing the results of the bake because it exists inside of the element graph here. But ultimately, this is still exactly what you would get. We're still close. It looks like that DCC logo is a little bit too far to the right, so I'm going to move it over because I want to have some sort of bleed. But we need that black band, right, that we had from the other stuff. So if we look at how Image Mapper is being used, especially with the clamped wrap mode feature, we could take something like a solid color, and since we are making a mask, we need to set this to white because ultimately we want to control the color through the mask. Wherever white is, then we will receive the color, and we're going to use Image Mapper. We're going to duplicate this one, bring this over and put our UVs in. So now you can see, yes, because it's clamped, then we're able to modify the scale of this thing and treat it like a 2D object. And now I'm just going to turn my scale lock off so I can modify the scale of this on the x-axis. So I'm going to crank that down so it stretches it out. And I'm going to leave it at the same offset location so that it's at least along the same position of the Nabro logo that we placed with the same image mapper that we duplicated. And I'm going to increase the Y scale just at, whoops, I was on the wrong node. This node here. I'm going to crank that up so it's a little bit thicker so it encompasses the logo and meets some of those brand standards that we've talked about. And now we just need to blend these two together. Now, if we remember, we need to pay attention to what's white and what's black. In this case, these logos should be inverted, so I'm going to invert that. And then I'm going to blend this on top. So I'm just going to hit B and say this is going to be multiplied over this. And now we can view this final output, and this is exactly what we want to see. We want to see black where we're going to see the cardboard, white where we're going to see the color of the ink. So this is already meeting in line with our original layering project that we had going on here. And with that all set up, we can go ahead and hold down Shift to drag a marquee. And let's just give ourselves some breathing room over here. Let's create a section, and I'm going to comment this by holding down Shift and C. I'm going to call this Setup Image Projection. And this is the basis for what we got going on here. Let's look at adding in the rest of those logos. So I'm going to go to my package, and I'm going to bring in the hypercharge logo. Let's start with the hypercharge logo. And then we also have our packaging info. That's going to come afterwards. We also have our this side up logo, which will use the same position from the image mapper on this so that we can drag it down. and it all remain in the center of the box. And then we also need our barcodes and our dim weight information. And that should wrap it up in terms of the overall graphic. Let's pull off of here and let's do another image mapper. And first things first, let's make sure that the wrap mode is set to clamped and that we're using the same UVs as this. So I'm going to drag that connection up here. And remember, we're going to need to invert this so that the white is the logo and black is the background. So I'm going to invert that. And then I'm going to blend this on top of here. And that's going to give us another new layer. So I'm going to hit B on my keyboard because I set it up as a keyboard shortcut. And instead of this being the background, I'm going to set this as the foreground. I'm going to set this as the background instead. Now I'm just going to go over here to Image Mapper, and I'm going to mess with the scale. So I'm going to uncheck the lock and start scaling this up so it's tinier and meets more along the lines of what the logo looks like. And actually, let's, I can see that there's a little bit of white here. I'm just curious. I'm going to duplicate this, drag this into here, and drag this into here instead. And then drag this into here by holding down Control. And I get a better result. It's a cleaner result. So you would probably want to do your inversions before you do your image mapping. And it added like a little white thing around it. So I'm going to do the inversion first. And now with that being in play, let's adjust the image mapper by hitting V here. And we can drag this guy up. Right click in our offset and drag it up. And now I'm going to duplicate this inversion and this image mapper by holding down Control, selecting both of them, and then making the appropriate connections. And at this point, I'm going to have to start navigating to this mesh UV. So maybe instead I do selecting both of these and just drag this out a little bit, and I can modify my comment box. And I can encapsulate this stuff with the comment box as well. We're going to pull that UV off and drag it right into there. Use the same UV set. And then we're going to right click or edit this value to be 1.93. At least we get this back to being square. And then we're going to expand our comment box a little bit and make a new blend. And this will be the foreground, and this will be the background. And this is going to get added to this. So I'm going to take the image mapper of this side up, and I'm going to look at this final blend as a final output. And I'm going to take the image mapper, make sure the scale's locked, right click here, and just going to drag this guy down. And then increase that scale value so I can repeat it across and then move it and then drag us down right here. So we're still playing relatively close to the center line of where this hypercharge box logo or hypercharge on box logo is. Hold down Control, select all these images and drag them up. And we're going to select this inversion, this image mapper, and we're going to duplicate this. And in fact, actually, I'm going to delete that. I want to use the same image mapper as the hypercharge and box logo in this situation, just because this box info artwork is really close to the same position as this hypercharge on box logo in the artwork. Now again, like, yep, I'm going to have to drag all, I'm tired of doing that. You know what? I'm just going to pull out from here. And I know that up here is an easier access point for me, so I'm just going to drop this right here in the space and say reroute. And that's going to give me another access point for these UVs. So I don't have to always go right back down here. I can just place a new reroute node, and then I can pull off and use it just like it's the source node itself. And I'm going to blend this together. Blend this as the foreground, blend this as the background, and we're going to add this together. And I'm going to take the image mapper from this box info, and I'm going to right click on my offset and just bring it over here so it encapsulates that hypercharge on box logo. And let's view this as the final output so that we can scale this appropriately. And since it's a little tiny, we're going to zoom in on this and then pay attention to the settings here. Let's scale this up. And I do want to kind of be close. Whoops. Do want to be close to the edge of the Nabro logo there. Not touching the hypercharge logo. And so some of these need to be adjusted a little bit. So I'm going to just take this image mapper and scale this down a little bit and scale this down a little bit so that the hypercharge brand has a little bit of breathing room. And that's looking pretty decent. Maybe we just bring it down a little bit, right about there. And let's add in the remaining two logos, which is really simple. Same process that we had before. So let's get back into our element graph in center stage. And I'm going to take the inversion and the image mapper and the blend, and I'm just going to duplicate all those and then hook them up appropriately so that the image is this. This is going into the image. The UVs from our Reroute node are going into this UV. The output is going into the background, and the output of the blend is going into the foreground. And we've already got the correct blending method set up. We just need to worry about the location of this logo. And we're just going to quickly duplicate these nodes and repeat that process for the last piece of artwork. And that way we'll be able to just hammer out the rest of this real quick. And now I'm just going to look at this as the final output and put that in center stage. And go over here to my barcode image mapper. And I'm going to reset the scale of this, uncheck that so that I can squish this and scale it down, and right click and position it appropriately. And then slide this up a little bit more and a little bit more here. And this is all just fine tuning how you want the overall graphic to look. And I'm going to say that I need to actually maybe consider keeping in line with the DCC logo. I also should probably consider moving this side up and up a little bit more and scaling it down, but we'll look at that here in a second. Let's take our dim weight information and we're going to lock that and scale that down and right click in our offset and shift that down here. Try to maintain that it's on this kind of grid line relatively close as best we can. And yeah, now let's take this side up on our image mapper and we're going to scale that down a little bit more and then bring it up in the graph. So ultimately what we're looking for is just a consistent bleed all the way around this graphic, so that when we apply this as a decal, we have a buffer of space that we can then go back and modify where these logos are positioned on the decal projection. So this is looking really nice. There's one final thing that we need to do. And that is the last and final blend. And so we have our blend here from the final output. We're going to pull off of this and we're going to say blend, or we could hit B on our keyboard like we did before. And then instead of doing anything with the background, we're just going to make this a solid color and we're just going to make that black. So this right here is our final output. I'm just going to hit Shift C and say final decal output. So here in this comment section, we have the setup image projection, and then this is the final decal output. In the next video, thank you so much for sitting around and waiting through this I hope that it's been educational and seeing how that we can set up a 2D kind of graphic all along the way for us to then finally get to this point where we're making a 2D mask that we can use in a decal. This is going to make a lot more sense in the next video. We're going to start setting up some additional parameters and seeing how we can blend this on top of our box and expanding the rest of the elements section of this entire asset. So really appreciate you taking the time to watch. Hope it was educational and can't wait to show you a little bit more inside of InstaMAT. Thank you.